Randi Weingarten, a president of one of the largest teachers' unions in the nation, tried to blame President Trump for schools not being open right now, even though he hasn't been president for a number of months.
I begged the Trump administration to do exactly what the Biden administration did, which is real safety guidance and resources. But the bottom line is this.
Most of them are.
If we had actually listened to Dr. Redfield and the CDC last May, and that the former president, hadn't kept on changing his mind and changing these things, we would have gotten more schools back in session.
Now, there's a lot wrong with the statements that she made. First and foremost, teachers' unions have been a determining factor in not reopening schools. For example, in Chicago, they were all set to go back to in-person learning for K through 8th grade. But the day before, teachers' unions decided not to do it, and the teachers effectively went on strike. And speaking of Chicago, they finally reopened high schools after more than 13 months just a few weeks ago. So high schoolers were forced to have virtual classes for more than a year because of teachers' unions. And this isn't just me making stuff up. This study from Brown University found that contrary to the conventional understanding of school districts, we find evidence that politics, far more than science, shaped school district decision making. So for everyone saying follow the science, the teachers' unions have not been doing that. The article continues, mass partisanship and teacher union strength best explain how school boards approached reopening. Once again, teachers' unions had a lot of say in when and how schools could reopen, in many instances to the detriment of the students who were trying to go back to school. Recently, the New York Post broke this story, showing that the CDC actually changed language based on emails with teachers' unions. One example is that the CDC was going to write that schools could provide in-person instruction regardless of community spread of the virus, which kind of makes sense because it's been 13 months and students need to be back in school and young kids are not as susceptible. However, teachers' unions didn't like that, and they added this caveat, which actually ended up in the final document. In the event of high community transmission results from a new variant, a new update of these guidelines may be necessary. Now, maybe that doesn't sound too bad to you, but they are just giving themselves an out to once again decide not to go back to school. And speaking of the CDC guidelines, they were so bad and so not based in science that even Jake Tapper of CNN said as much.
So the CDC guidelines suggest schools could opt not to reopen in-person classes if they're in a red zone with the high community spread that you just referred to. According to our analysis of federal data, that includes 99% of American children. But you have said, quote, there's very little transmission happening in the schools. CDC researchers just wrote in JAMA that, quote, there's been little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission. So why give schools that opt not to open up?
In that red zone, we advocate for hybrid elementary school. And if you're in middle school or high school, we would advocate for virtual learning for that group.
But President Biden has promised to always follow the science. Can you point to any scientific reasons for students in the United States not to return to in-person classes tomorrow? Why not open the schools right now?
You know, I think if you look at what's, as you noted, there's 90% of communities with this high rate of transmission going on right now, and we really don't want to bring community disease into the classroom.
And the CDC director had no real response. But Democrats don't want you to worry about that. They don't want you to worry that students are lagging behind because they're not going to school. As a matter of fact, if you bring up school reopening, well, you're just using that as a distraction, at least according to Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
Our focus so far has been on trying not to get distracted by sideshows that are an attempt by Republicans in Congress at many times to distract us. So whether it's Dr. Seuss, I mean, that controversy, or, even for a while, it was school reopening as if we were against school reopening. I mean, that was even in Senator Scott's speech last night.
And this is why it's so frustrating. From the party that always says, follow the science, they have consistently not followed the science when it comes to school reopening. They have chosen to disregard the science and cave to teachers' unions. Because make no mistake, if teachers' unions were not as powerful to the Democratic Party or as important to the Democratic Party, schools would have been open a long time ago. In many instances, like where I live, they've been open since September, and there have been no real issues. So why exactly did Chicago wait until a few weeks ago to finally reopen their high schools? It doesn't make any sense. It's not following the science. It's simply following the whims of the teachers' unions. That's it. And I've really tried in the past to not be anti-teachers union because I think teachers are pretty important people. But things like this make it really difficult to like teachers unions at all. But what do you think about this? Do you have more evidence of teachers unions choosing to not go to school and not really basing it in the science? If you do, let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.